Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sellik the Thunder podcast. It is a very special episode today, as it is the first episode of the POSTECOGLOU era at Celtic Football Club. There's been speculation for the past few weeks, but finally we can sit and have our roundtable discussion with all the facts, with all the evidence, with the fact that we actually have a manager appointed. And you might hold an opinion, you might think it's the right appointment, you might think it's the wrong appointment, but at the end of the day, we've got to take what we're given. And that's all we can really do. I'm happy to be joined today by both Ryan McGinley and Kieran Auld. Kieran, you look tired. I don't know if that's going to resemble your thoughts on the whole appointment situation.
Oh, I mean, it's quite fitting, isn't it? But I don't know. I'm just shattered. So hopefully I can actually get my words out today.
Well, do you know what? To be honest, it's been, Ryan, talking about getting your words out, it's been long for us because we've been doing live stream after live stream, sort of breaking news story after breaking news story, all leading to this point. The wait is finally over. And finally we can talk about the situation with a bit more clarity. So yep. I guess today you're a bit more excited to sit down and actually talk about something that's concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that everything's over and done with, and now everything's over the line and we can finally say with clarity that we've got a manager and we know who the manager is, rather than a constant guessing game, which was the case the past 2-3 months. I think we appointed them after, was it 106 days, 105, 106 days?
106 days, yeah.
Just, it's mental, innit? But I'm just glad that we've got somebody in the door now. And after speaking to people and watching loads of media, I'm a lot more optimistic than I was a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not feeling as downhearted as I was 2 weeks ago when we done that live stream. It was 2 weeks ago today that we done that, and I was absolutely gutted about Eddie Howe. But I'm more optimistic than I was. There's still obviously risks to go along with it, but I'm optimistic.
Well, talking about the fact you're saying you've got to speak to a lot of people, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit of an exciting inclusion to the podcast. We're going to be speaking later on to someone from down under, you could say, who's going to give us a little bit more of an insight on POSTECOGLOU. Now, I know there's been a lot of people already who have had the opportunity to bring people onto their shows, and on social media we've heard a lot as well, but we're doing our best to keep the viewers of our podcast, the listeners of our podcast, as informed as possible. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. We'll introduce the guest, and Ryan, you were the one lucky enough to sit down and speak with Harper, so we'll get on to that a little bit later on in the show. But let's just start the show with talking about the situation. And of course, Ryan, you've already spoke about the fact you're feeling a little bit more optimistic. Kieran, we'll start with you because I've spoke to Ryan a lot about this on the channel. You've not really had as much of a platform as him per se. Of course, we've voiced all our opinions on social media numerous times around this whole situation, but it's done now. It's not the ideal situation for Celtic. Let's cut to the chase. We weren't hoping for this. A matter of 3 weeks ago, we honestly didn't know who POSTECOGLOU was, but the announcement has now come. He's got to speak to Celtic supporters for the first time. What's your first impressions? Are you happy with what his vision for the club is and what he said, and just your general reaction to the announcement by the club?
I mean, the appointment in general, as you said, it's far from what we were expecting a few weeks ago. As you said, never knew who the guy was a few weeks ago, and we've been sort of forced into like getting on board with the idea. I mean, no matter how any interviews I watch that, and the more optimistic I do feel about it, I'm very aware that this has been forced upon me by the negligence of the board to actually get in Eddie Howe, because he was the top target. It didn't work out. We can put that into the past. But the thing that annoyed me the most about it, I'm sure you spoke about it on your channel as well, was the fact that they tried to make it as if Hingy was top target. I'm like, why even go down that route? Like, why even bother? Like, you actually came out with a statement.
But see, that's what do you put the blame for that more towards the club, or do you think that's just Jerry McCulloch going his own way and giving us one of his trademark interviews? Because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, yeah, the board have probably just wanted to tar over this with the brush of, aye, this is the man, this is who we wanted all along.
I know, I don't know if Jerry went rogue on that one, but I don't know. But in terms of the appointment, as Ryan said, he's in the door now. You need to try and be more optimistic about it, even though it's not an appointment that we wanted, and as many people probably won't be happy with. But I mean, everybody's in the same boat, I think, now. No matter how you felt before it was made, everybody is going to back the man until such a point that he maybe doesn't deserve it. But everybody hopes that this works out. Even the people that are against this appointment, nobody wants to see him fail. Even if you're not a fan of the appointment, there's not one Celtic supporter out there that will want to willingly see somebody fail in their job. Everybody wants them to turn it around. It's a similar, like, I say turn it around because it just flashbacks to Lennon, like in terms of people wanted him out, but everybody still wanted him to turn it around. But nobody actively seeks him to do a bad job. It just happens. But as I've said, but you need to try and be a bit more optimistic. Last week we were sort of playing devil's advocate and sort of like we never really put ourselves on either side of the fence. We were just trying to look at the positives and the negatives of the appointment. You've got people that are very much optimistic about it, and I admire the optimism. I really do. And then you've got people that are very pessimistic about it, and you can completely understand their reservations about the appointment because there's equal. You can need to get a bit of balance on here. And I don't know. As I said, everybody's got to try and be a bit more optimistic about it. But everybody that has got their reservations are well within their rights to have them.
Yeah, that's the kind of fine line, isn't it, Ryan? Because let me touch on this part. I have had an abundance of Rangers fans coming over and giving their sort of opinion to the appointment, and it is completely understandable. With the situation Celtic have been in the past year, it's quite rightly a laughable appointment when you're going towards a rebuild, you're going towards trying to establish yourself as a top team again, and then you hit out with a manager that no one's really heard of. But there is that fine line now between, we're not saying he's the best thing from sliced bread, but what we're doing is we're getting behind the man who's now in charge of our club. You can't, just because he's been put in the unfortunate position of the board's wrongdoings, doesn't mean that we need to look at him and paint him out as this terrible, terrible manager. We've got to be optimistic. We've got to back him, Ryan. It's not...
Yeah.
At this point, it's really no choice. We've got to, as I said at the top of the show, we've got to kind of take what we've been given. And if that's not the right appointment, then okay, fair enough. But there's no reason why we shouldn't at least give the guy our backing.
Got to be honest, I've been a massive critic over the past couple of months of this board. And the saying, back the team and back Ange, but sack the board, still remains for me. I totally agree with what the Green Brigade are doing. I even agree with Dominic Mackay's face being in it because he was involved with the Eddie Howe talks. At the end of the day, he tried to get him. He didn't get his number one target, so he's already coming in. I don't agree with this thing that he started. He's starting on the 1st of July. That's not the case. He's been actively involved in getting the new manager in the door. He didn't get his number one target, despite what people say that he isn't involved in that. He is involved. So he's in a sort of purgatory for me at the moment. Yes, he did speak well after his press conference. Not after the press conference, after the
interview.
one-on-one vetted interview with Jerry McCulloch. But we'll see where it goes from there. As I said, you've got to back the man. You've got to. There is no point in moaning about POSTECOGLOU anymore because it won't get you anywhere. It will just make your mindset completely negative. We've got to get behind the man. At the end of the day, he's not the problem. The board's the problem, and we've got to get behind the manager regardless. And I certainly will. I thought he spoke really well in his interview. I thought he sounded up for it, which was great. And it's such a low bar, but he sounds more interested than Lennon was when he got the job. He sounds more invested in the project that's ahead of him. And I know he might feel lucky. It might be because he feels lucky that he's got this job, this opportunity. But I want to hear this from somebody. I want to hear somebody that is invested and he's motivated to succeed. And I heard everything that I wanted to hear from that interview, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll come on to Dom Mackay later on. You made a really interesting point that because that's another issue which has divided Celtic fans this morning after that Green Brigade banner was posted on social media that included Dom Mackay and the suspect list, you could say. So we'll come on to that a bit later on. Absolutely, it's something we have to talk about. But the interview itself, yeah, let's talk about that for a minute before we talk about the technicalities, because I want to talk about the contract. I want to talk about, I want to address that whole situation that people are going on about the contract. I want to talk about the rest of the statement and everything else. But the interview itself, I must admit, I was very pleased from everything I heard from Mr. Postecoglou. Now, once again, just for the sheer clarification of anybody who may be a Celtic supporter or a supporter of any opposition, this is not me coming out and saying he's the greatest thing from sliced bread, and because he's saying this, that, the next thing, we're guaranteed success. This is me just taking my first impressions from the guy's interview and saying I was very pleased in what he said. I thought he spoke really well. His view in the game sounded great. I liked him talking about his kind of ambition for the club and how it matches those of Dom Mackay's and this modernisation, which we'll come on to talk about. For me, there was no really any worrying signs or anything, which is what we want to avoid. Now, people might point towards the starting date and all the rest of it, but that is, let's be completely honest, the starting date of when Ange Postecoglou comes to Celtic is completely out with his control. We're living in a world right now which doesn't allow him to be rocking up to Lennoxtown tomorrow morning. We can't really do much about that. But Kieran, we're getting a manager here who firmly believes in a nice, entertaining brand of football. We're hearing now, we can all firmly and safely say here, we haven't had the courtesy of watching his football. We've had to take everything. We've had to take it tongue in cheek. We've had to just take pointers from journalists from Japan, Australia, from people who have went and done their research. I had Boys Analytics, for example, on the channel the other day, and he's been doing a bit of watching and researching into that. But in general, from what he is saying, is something that I think might not, let's not talk about if it will or won't work out, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a boring time with him in charge, Kieran.
No, I mean, that's one of the things that we spoke about when there was speculation about him last week. We were saying all the things we were hearing as he plays this attacking brand of football, which is obviously something that needs to be part of any manager that takes over Celtic's philosophy. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to work out at Celtic. It's part of the ethos of the club that you play an attacking brand, an exciting brand of football. You're not going to get a Celtic manager coming in and try to park the bus against teams in the league. It's just simply not going to happen. So, I mean, it's encouraging to hear that, but at the same time, I did, as you said, the interview, there's nothing really ringing any alarm bells, but in terms of, you can talk a good game, but it's just, hopefully comes in and gets us going straight away, gets as much time as possible with this team, tries to implement the brand of football he's wanting to play, and hopefully we can see the results going into the season, because as a lot of people are saying, he does need to hit the ground running to get a lot of people inside, because he's facing an uphill battle right now, maybe no through any fault of his own, just the circumstances surrounding this appointment is what's making it an uphill battle for him, because he's already going to have a lot of people writing him off already because of who he is. And I'm not saying I'm on either. I'm very indifferent about this appointment. I think but a couple of weeks ago I was just very disappointed about it. That's the perfect way to put it. With Celtic, it's just about, I think it's perfect. If he hits the ground running, it'll breathe life back into the club and hopefully try and vitalise the support a wee bit, because I feel like many out there might be the same as me. It's just really, everything's just feeling a bit lacklustre now, and hopefully he can prove everybody that's got doubts wrong and shows what he can do.
And Ryan, I know this is a bit off topic from the serious conversation, but you were very happy with his word choice and such, and the use of mate and the accent and all the rest of it. He sounded like a nice upbeat guy. That was nice. But on you go, son.
I like that he's putting on this sort of persona in front of the cameras, but I can just tell the way he is with the players. You can tell he's the boss. I got that sort of aura around him. Yeah. I mean, even his former team, Marinos, we're calling him boss in that. So it's very much that sort of persona that he's built up. I don't know if he can mix the two together, if he can mix that sort of press conference persona. I know he's got history with falling out with certain journalists in Australia, but if he can mix that sort of persona with the sort of boss persona, I think we could be on to a winner. I just want to be optimistic now, honestly. I'm sick of being negative, and I do agree with Kieran. I mean, there are a couple of points I'm quite in the middle with it. I know we could have done better, but we could have done a lot worse, in my opinion, as well.
And that's it. And look, we could have been sitting here in this same situation saying, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Roy Keane's now our manager," and we could have been in a worse state of affairs.
See, I've said that before. I would much rather take the punt on a virtual unknown than Roy Keane, because we know what Roy Keane can do. We know what Roy Keane can do.
And that's it. It's like we've been landed in an unfortunate position. We started this podcast after the first derby of the season. I believe that was the first derby of the season, sorry, the first derby of the year. It was the 2-0 at Ibrox. We went down to 10 men. 1-0, was it 1-0? 1-0, 2-0, 1-0.
I'm sure it was 1-0.
It was 1-0. The 1-0 at Ibrox. We started after that. And from that point on, we had Dubai, we had Lennon getting sacked. We've had negative after negative after negative after. Well, Lennon getting sacked wasn't so much a negative, but we've had, just a constant stream of negatives on this podcast. And I see people complaining all the time, like, "Oh, Ryan and Kieran come on at a time, they're just constantly negative," and I'm constantly negative as well. But we've really not had anything to be positive about. We've literally, physically, mentally can't help that.
You can't try and act positive without looking like a happy clapper.
Aye. And so now, when we have the chance, we need to take the optimistic points that we can. I think we need to just take it and run with it at the moment.
Sorry to interrupt. It's not even positive and negative. It's realism and deludedness. Like, we've got to be realistic. There is nothing that has been a positive about last season, regardless. Second place is not a positive. Young players getting developed is a positive to an extent, but at the end of the day...
But at the end of the day, did we really develop enough young players for the state that we were in anyway? So once again, that was another negative.
It was just due to what was required at the time. I mean, you're getting young players into the team because your star loan signing couldn't cut it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Kieran,
swings and roundabouts, I guess.
No, it's just because you mentioned the youth players there. It's something like, because we were talking about Angie's interview, and he said something about working, like trying to work closely with the academy, and that's hopefully something that is positive that you can maybe take forward, because it's something that's been lacking. As you said, the only people that have been getting a chance are people that like taking positions are lax out and players that are really underperforming. I mean, hopefully you can try and implement some new talent into the team for the academy, because it's something that we need to try and bring through. Hopefully you can see players like Karamoku Dembele getting a chance, but I know there's a whole issue with him only having a year left in his contract and that, and I've seen certain people saying he should only get a chance if he signs a new deal, and I'm like, well, why would they do that? Why would they sign a new deal when they promise a bit more?
Makes no sense.
It
brings me on nicely to, and sorry to cut you off there, Kieran, if you had a point, but it ties in with what you were, I'm imagining, going to touch on, and what kind of links in with what we're saying there anyway. Ange in this interview touches on the fact that they have been underway with identifying perhaps targets. There has been talks of transfers. Now this is the big part for Ange. The job begins. It's no longer talk that he's coming to Celtic. He is at Celtic Football Club. He is now the manager, and we need to start that process. Now, there have been questions surrounding the draw factor at Celtic with Ange Postecoglou in charge. I think it's now time to forget about that for a moment. And now it's about diving in, Kieran, isn't it? And actually getting things done, identifying players as quickly as possible and signing the best quality that we can, because we don't have a lot of time to waste now. Now, it's all very good. And this is my personal opinion. I don't know if you both agree. In my personal opinion, we don't have time for long, drawn-out scouting processes, which we would ideally like. We just don't simply have the time for it. The players that Ange is apparently, my fear is this has been said to appease us as supporters. My fear is they're saying, say that just to keep them happy and think that we are doing it, when in fact it could be a chance behind the scenes that we've actually not got anybody on the transfer list for now. But the realistic scenario is now that we need to start this process here.
The wheels need to be in motion now, because we keep talking about in the chat the realistic lineup that we might have for the Champions League qualifiers. Bain in goals, Anthony Ralston at right back. I've seen people saying it might have been released, but I don't know anything about that, to be honest.
Yeah, Celtic haven't gave any sort of clarification, have they, about our releases yet? Unlike
he got a 5-year deal under Rodgers, so he'll still have a couple of years left on that, or at least he'll have one more year, I think.
I could be one more, because it was 2017 we played PSG, so that's 4 years. So but I know what I'm saying is, like, a back line of Ralston, Welsh, Beaton, then Taylor if he's back for his holiday after the Euros and that. So we're in a really bad predicament. And as you said, like, hopefully they've got targets lined up, because you kind of get the impression that hopefully they've been scouting, like he's been telling them his targets and like during the negotiations of this, and they're not going into this week completely clueless as to who to get. But I mean, it's the fact you're not really seeing too many links. You're seeing the odd, like, vague link in the papers, but the papers have shown the past few months that absolutely nothing is to be trusted that comes from them, because it's absolute garbage. They just make it up on the spot. And it's honestly, how many false dawns did we have Eddie Howe supposedly within the week in that? Like,
it'd be here on Monday, mind.
It'd be here on Monday 5 weeks ago. But honestly, I don't know what to think when it comes to recruitment, because obviously we need to get it gone, and hopefully they've got targets identified already, because you said we've not got time. We've not got time for these long drawn out. But I'd imagine we might have a wee scout or two at the Euros or something, but even then it's going to be far too late. And are we realistically going to get any players that are playing at the European Championships?
Yeah, Ryan, there's been murmurs of certain players who could be targets for Celtic. There was that story that the Daily Record broke yesterday that Kieran has already touched on. Don't know if we can quite believe, but Patrick Berg has been linked with an unnamed Scottish club. I think we're all hoping it's Celtic with the past links we've had with Scandinavian players and such, and Norwegian players. So, there's murmurs there, Ryan. So you're kind of adding up 2 and 2 with what was said in that interview about the early process starting and then stuff like that. Are you trusting Ange to bring in the right guys?
See, that's where the problem lies with me. Because I mean, I want to trust them with players, but at the same time, I would want a sporting director or a director of football to be pulling up a short list. I know that role is currently vacant. It's been vacant for a couple of months now since Nick Hammond left. With regards to that Patrick Berg, I know YouTube clips can make players look like world beaters. But I don't know if you watched it. There was a 3-minute clip I watched of him a couple of days ago, and he does look the business. I don't want to speculate and say, he'll be the best thing since sliced bread and that. I know we've used that a couple of times in this podcast already, but the boy looks a baller. I mean, Norwegian can ping a ball 30, 40 yards to a target.
To be fair, but I remember watching a compilation on Barkas back in back last summer, and I thought he was going to be better than Foster.
It's like these compilations
I would like
you have
to make
to
a
take with
case
a
for
pinch of
Barkas.
salt, don't you? I'd like
to see Barkas given a chance, but I mean, just saying, like, the
it's like,
compilations are
let's be real, these because the same thing happened with Bio, the same thing happened with Marion Shred, the same thing happened with many other signings that we made in this club. They look bagging, but then they come in, you're like, oh god.
The only player that a video compilation made them look worse was Amido Balde, because I remember watching an 11-minute one and I just seen him hit the goalkeeper so many times.
11 minutes of Amido Balde, Jesus Christ.
I don't know, why did you put yourself through that fucking torture?
What age was I then? I must have been about 16 or something. Watching him, I was like, "Who is this guy?" And this was before he slayed what's his name, Rogers Liverpool in the Dublin decider. And then I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, the deflection off the goalkeeper. But no, he looks pretty good in terms of other targets. I'd be making the case for Kevin Nisbet already, to be perfectly honest with you. I think quite a few podcasts ago, I was saying we shouldn't be signing so many Scottish talents, but I would make an exception for him because he just looks like a goal scorer. His movement's brilliant. He knows where the back of the net is, and he will improve. He improved in the step up from Dunfermline to Hibs. I think he would improve even more in the step up from Hibs to Celtic.
He done it even before that. Even the step from Rafe to Dunfermline, he improved. I mean, Partick Thistle, he was non-existent basically, but from Rafe to Dunfermline, from Dunfermline to Hibs, he had a decent step up in level there. Now, the question is, Kieran, when it comes to recruitment, before we get on to speaking more about Ange with someone who knows a lot more about Ange, when it comes to recruitment, this is where now the question comes in, and there's my camera away. This is where the question comes in of whether or not Ange Postecoglou will have enough know-how in European, Scottish, English football to make signings that would probably be more household names and more appeasing to Celtic fans. Are we worried that Ange comes in and he starts to sign all these players from Australia, from Japan? We need that bit of consistency there. I don't even want to say what word consistency, because that implies that we need to keep on everybody that's already at the club. And I don't really want us to keep on Kennedy and Strachan. But this is why we need our director of football, I think. This is why we need maybe even someone in the coaching staff and his assistant managers maybe that have a bit of a know-how around our game, the European game, to help him out with that recruitment process, Kieran.
I think especially in a rebuild like this, it's about finding the balance, because it's obviously going to be a massive help if we can try and get a marquee signing in that's going to really, the fans can say, right, we can get on board with that. But I think it's about trusting his judgment as well. If the board have believed this man's the man for Celtic, we do need to believe his judgment and player as well. Because the board have got to back him. They've got to back him the same way they would have an Eddie Howe. Because if you've made the call that he's the next best thing instead of Eddie Howe, you need to keep up the level that you've got. You can't do the cheap option. And I'd like to think the board know that because of the pressure they're under the now. But I mean, if the board don't go out and back this guy fully, then what's the point? Because they're just throwing him under the bus. Yep. They get in a cheap option like compared to an Eddie Howe. If they don't back him, then it is that. You can blame him all you want. If the board don't back somebody, then we're going to be fucked. So we need to. It's always apt with me, but it's just. But in terms of the backing, that's just the biggest thing for me. You need to trust him to a certain extent, because there's no point moaning about it now. Like, you need to trust this guy's judgment. If the board have somehow deemed him the person to be in charge at Celtic, we need to trust his judgment and give him the money he needs.
A couple of more points I want to talk about just very quickly. I seen an interesting tweet last night, which I actually sat for a second, looked at and went, wow. And I believe you've probably seen it as well, because it did kind of pop off on the old Celtic Twitter. Somebody pop a tweet saying, oh yeah, the Peter Law or whoever it was came out and said, oh, we've been tracking Ange's progress for a number of years. We've been really interested in him. He's someone whose name has always been in and around our thoughts and all the rest of it. Why on God's earth then did we appoint Neil Lennon in 2019 without giving someone like Ange Postecoglou, who apparently we have been looking at for years, even an interview at the club, Ryan?
It just makes the decision to sign up Neil Lennon in the Shires all the more baffling. Now, I will say that Neil Lennon was the right choice to lead us through an interim period in order to get us through. In terms of an audition period for the permanent job, he failed in multiple targets because we get turned over by Rangers at Ibrox. There was so many last minute winners, it's incredible. And then, I mean, I know we won the treble, but it was basically Brendan's treble before it. And then he get given the job in the Shires. And I think an appointment like Postecoglou would have been a lot more positively viewed if it was at that point rather than Neil Lennon. And it really does show you that sentimentality has really bitten us in the arse, or it's came back to bite us. It's been the big problem, and we can't continue with this sentimentality, including with Strachan and Kennedy. In my opinion, the only way that Strachan and Kennedy can stay in a job is if Ange Postecoglou personally wants him at the club. If he doesn't want him at the club, and you're keeping them on, you're making the same mistakes as what happened with Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon didn't get his own men in, and I would say that was a big factor in the downfall in the second season because he didn't have his own men to back him up. So yeah, we can't hamstring or I don't even know if that's a term you would use. You can't weaken your appointment by putting other guys on him, by thrusting other guys onto him. You've got to bring his own men in, and sentimentality's got to go. This new era's got to be a new era. It can't be that the same mistakes can't get made again and again. So the sentimentality for me has to go. Yeah,
I think you're pretty much spot on with that. And then finally, before we head over to Harper, who's going to talk us a bit more through Ange Postecoglou himself, Kieran, there was a big talking point surrounding the contract. It was a 12-month rolling contract that Ange has been put on. And I didn't do me in the podcast any favours.
No, you jumped the shark. You jumped the shark. Making us look like assholes.
I put up an interesting contract choice. I wasn't alluding to anything in terms of my opinion of the contract. It was basically just because at the point, as soon as it was announced, that was one of the biggest talking points. And I was like, okay, let's see what people are saying about it. My opinion is the same as you guys. But Kieran, I don't think that's anything to worry about, or anything that suggests any sort. People are making out as like, oh, they're para already and all the rest of it. And I'm like, no.
It's nothing to concern themselves about. I don't know if people know what a 1 year rolling contract is, the way they're talking about it. I mean, it's been plenty of managers at Celtic have been on that, including Rodgers, was, and then when he got his new deal, that's when he got given the 4 year deal. So it's like, it really is just a sort of, it's a non-story. I don't know why people are making such a meal of it. But people are just looking for anything to try and jump over this guy already. But as I said,
oh, sorry, there you go. Oh, finish off, mate. Finish off.
No, I was just saying, like, it's going to be, I think it was Ryan was talking about this the other day, and it was just how he's going to have the media against him in this country for the get-go. It's the same way any manager, it even happened to Pedro Caixinha for the second to go here. They ought to, like, it's very similar parallels that many Rangers fans might like to draw about the whole fact. We love the fact he's talking a good game in that, and it's just about putting it into action. But in terms of him coming in, he's got the uphill battle. The fans not quite on side yet. But then he's going to have the media against him for the get-go as well, taking the piss out of absolutely everything that can happen. So
you can just tell he's one drop of the word organisation away from the media labelling him muck, to be quite honest. Like that is the kind of situation he's probably going to find himself in. Right, what were you going to say?
Can I just make a quick point? I just feel, and maybe I'm guilty of it to a small extent, but there's a sort of ignorance that's going around this appointment, and it's, to be fair, it's happened with Dundee United as well with their appointment. There's a lot of ignorance in the media with a sort of left field appointment.
It's been the same for years, hasn't it?
I know, but I think
for years.
I feel like in 2021 people should get behind these sort of appointments. We're trying something different. We're trying something new. Hell Mendes for trying something different and going for something that's fresh and new. there's just this sort of ignorance that comes from the media with these sort of appointments. I
'Cause
know he wasn't
I hear
everybody's
exactly.
choice, but
I hear exactly what you're saying. I think there is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I was all for this appointment. If anything, I was against the appointment. So I'm not going to come out and contradict everything that I have said in the past. There is a fine line, I think, between the ignorance that the media, maybe not so much yet on this occasion, displays when it comes to a match like this. It happened with Ronnie Dyer, it happened with Alessio at Kilmarnock, it's happened with Pedro Caixinha, it's happened everywhere up and down Scotland for a number of years. But there is a completely different viewpoint from what the media's ignorance is like to maybe the unhappiness of the Celtic fans. Celtic fans weren't unhappy because of his nationality, because of where he's coming from, really. Well, maybe to an extent that was part of it.
It's merely unknown, isn't it?
Yeah, it's merely it's the position that we're in and the rebuild that we've got, and I think the fact that we had our heart set on someone like Eddie Howe for so long, I think it's the job ahead of him that makes it all the more worrying. I think if he came into this club after winning 10 in a row, Neil Lennon wins 10 in a row, walks away and goes, "I've done my job," sees later, and then they go with a point in Ange Postecoglou, I don't think the reaction would be anywhere near as negative from Celtic fans. It's more that kind of worrying, sceptic side of things that make it a bit more negative on our side.
I would say the chalice has been sort of artificially poisoned. It hasn't been poisoned. Like it's not a poisoned role. I just think that people were so excited by Eddie Howe that they can't look at anyone different. And I'm glad that I've been able to separate the two. I've been able to separate my disappointment with the sort of slight optimism towards this appointment. Put it this way, I'm 10 times more positive than I would have been under Roy Keane. So that's a start, and I can work with that because it would be total end game stuff if it was Roy Keane for me. Okay. I would really, really struggle to even watch Celtic next season. And I know that sounds blasphemous, but I could not get behind that sort of appointment.
No, in terms of, it's just maybe a closing statement thing, just to clarify, because I know there's a lot of people who really try to stick about into some podcasts, as if they're bound to into the board's party line sort of thing. And
I'm glad that we've not really been. I've not seen us being.
No, but it's coming. It is coming because some people don't watch any of them and just assume that everybody's talking the same nonsense. We talk our own brand of nonsense over here at the Celtic Thunder. But in terms of, I'd just like to say that it's not an appointment I was on board with. It's still one I'm very on the fence about. But as I said at the start of the podcast, just to reaffirm that I think we're on the same boat. We're all going to back the manager now that he's in, and we're going to try and look at the positives going forward. There's no point dwelling on the negatives. I think we can finally use this podcast here as a sort of get it off your chest sort of thing, and then we can sort of look forward with a bit of optimism. It's no optimism to excuse the negligence of the board. By no means are we forgetting or forgiving the absolute mess the board has put this club in. The very fact that this appointment has to happen in the first place. But being optimistic about it doesn't mean you're a happy clapper. Like, I think there's a big difference between that. There's nothing. We're not ignoring the negatives of this appointment. We've evenly discussed it here on the podcast, and we've just tried to give both sides a bit of a platform. But in terms of the actual appointment, hopefully it works out. Everybody hopes it works out, and hopefully the guy can hit the ground running and prove us all wrong.
Well, on that note, I'll let Ryan take us away. I'm saying that as if you're going to start talking now, but I'm now going to transition this over to an interview that Ryan conducted this morning with Harper from the Where Do We Begin podcast, which is available on all the podcast apps. Harper is Australian and, of course, has a bit of a know-how on the man himself, Ange Postecoglou. So sit back, enjoy that, and we'll be with you afterwards to discuss what we've heard and then end off the show pretty much.
As an Australian, what can you tell us about Ange Postecoglou?
Oh, Ange Postecoglou, honestly, he is considered by all those that know him well enough one of the greatest sporting minds in Australian sporting history, really, not just one of the greatest footballing minds, one of those greatest sporting minds. He's kind of basically universally adored and loved and cherished even in Australia here. He's just... Yeah, he's so widely held in such a high regard, so widely, and but he's like a super, super intelligent, switched on guy. Lives and breathes football. really. And as well, a trait that can be positive, can be negative, stubbornness. Like he, big time, if he doesn't get his way, he's just not going to do the job because he is set in his ways. I'm sure we'll talk about what his ways are a bit later. And he's just going to stick to that way. Like the backup plan is just to do the original plan better, if you know what I mean. And in Australia, he's had a bit of he's had a few run-ins with the media a couple of times. There's a famous one, if anyone wants to look it up, with a pundit called Craig Foster on the SBS channel. And yeah, he's not afraid to bite back at the media for sure.
So would you say he's quite stubborn with the way he is in both ways, with his managerial style and with his way with the media as well?
Yeah, for sure. Like if a media person asks kind of why results going badly, if they may be going badly, he'll just say, we're looking to improve the plan, really. He's not going to, he's an attacking manager. He's never going to switch to kind of park the bus, Jose Mourinho type football. You know, he's just set in his ways, like I said.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say what has the reaction been like to Ange's appointment in Australia?
To be honest, it's been like full-on excitement from all around. It's one of the biggest football stories in Australia for years, easily. It's the biggest managerial move in Australian history by far. Nothing comes close to it. Like, we've had a couple other managers in Europe before who have kind of bombed, really, but Ange Postecoglou, like I said, one of the greatest football minds, sporting minds in Australia. Everyone kind of knew that this kind of thing would be coming, not necessarily a club the size of Celtic, it was a shock, but it was, yeah, everyone's delighted with it. I've got to say, Celtic fans, some of them aren't all too pleased. So Australians have been laughing at that a bit, really. And they're like, these guys are in for the shock of their lives when they see how intelligent, how switched on, how amazing this guy is at being a football manager.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, with regards to his playing style, what can you tell Celtic? What can Celtic fans expect from a Postecoglou side, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So, yeah, like I said before, he's not switching from his attacking ways. He always speaks about, whenever he's asked about this kind of thing, he speaks about wanting to have his teams play in a way that his father would love and appreciate. He talks about his father all the time. Growing up, they obviously coming from Greece, living in Melbourne. His father, Jim, I think his name was, he was always working, but their thing to do together was to go to South Melbourne games on the weekend, and that was their connection. Football was their connection, really. So he has got a great love and a great connection with his father, and he wants to impress his father with the way his football teams play, and it is attack, really. It's like if Celtic come across a Bayern Munich or something eventually in the Champions League, if he's in charge, Celtic won't be sitting back. You'll be like going at Bayern Munich or PSG. You'll be going full throttle at them. You'll be going for their necks, going for the jugular. And I think there were a couple of games just when he took over the Socceroos, the Australian national team. We played the Netherlands, who in the 2014 World Cup, who were obviously the reigning runners-up, took the game to them, really had more possession than the Netherlands. This is a pretty average Australian side. Like, yeah, definitely not one of their greatest Australian sides. Took it up to the Netherlands, were beating them, nearly beat them in the game. Confederations Cup a few years later as well. And I think an important thing for him is having hard-running, super fit, these like finely tuned athletes all through the team, and especially the fullbacks. He will have the fullbacks running up and down all day. The fullbacks will be super attacking, and I'm not sure if you know about if you've seen Tim Cahill's goal from the 2014 World Cup. Have you seen that one before?
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I actually did watch that game live. That was one of the games I did watch live, and I'm not even just saying that to big you guys up, but I was really impressed by Australia in that game.
Yeah, and that was against the Netherlands, for those who don't know. And that Tim Cahill goal, I think Ian Robin had scored 30 seconds earlier, straight from the kickoff, feed it out to the right back, Ryan McGowan. He's actually played in Scotland before, Ryan McGowan.
He's played a couple
for
of teams.
Dundee, I think. Yeah, and maybe Hearts as well.
Hearts as well, yeah.
Ryan McGowan does this kind of looping cross from halfway, straight from the kickoff, basically, to Tim Cahill, who scores that amazing goal. So attack from the kickoff, attack at all costs, full pressure. There'll be goals. Like, don't worry about that. You'll see 5-4s, you'll see 3-alls. Yeah, you won't be playing dull football, that's for sure.
So this is a question I've just thought of there, just off the cuff, if you don't mind. Do you see similarities between Ange Postecoglou and the current Leeds manager, Marcelo Bielsa, with the way that the two play in terms of the possession-based, all-attacking football?
For sure. And Marcelo Bielsa is a similar kind of guy. I think there are lots of comparisons have been drawn, I think, rightly. Obviously, they're not exactly the same, but the way they play, their philosophy and their kind of ideology of wanting to revolutionise the game, I guess, which Postecoglou has in Australia and Japan. Like, he's changed football as we knew it in Australia forever, really. It's phenomenal. And Marcelo Bielsa has done the same in many clubs he's been at, taking Leeds. What he's done with Leeds has been amazing. And, you can definitely draw similarities to what Postecoglou's done with all his clubs in the national team.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really exciting. So from his time both in Australia and Japan, do you see him dipping into any of those markets for potential signings for Celtic?
That's an interesting one, actually. I've consumed a bit of Celtic media, and there's, am I right in saying that there's a bit of a need to rebuild? Is that something you'd agree with? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, not to put any pressure on Postecoglou, but this is the biggest rebuild in terms of my lifetime. I'm 23 years old. This is the biggest rebuild. We'll need at least about 10, 11 players in order to properly function, I would say, as a football club. So it is a big job. Yeah.
Well, this is like the job he's almost destined to do, this kind of rebuilding job. He's done it everywhere. He coached Melbourne Victory, an A-League team. They're one of, if not the biggest club in Australia throughout their time in the A-League. And he took them from third bottom to third top in a season, and got rid of some club legends, including, he got rid of Harry Kewell, actually. He's not afraid to get rid of big names. And so there definitely are a few players that I can think of. There's an Australian player who's a bit of an up-and-comer. He wasn't really playing too much when Ange was in charge of the Socceroos, but his name's Aiden Hrustic. A bit of a funny one to pronounce, but Aiden Hrustic, he plays for Frankfurt in the Bundesliga. He's a bit of an attacking midfielder type player. He scored a free kick for the Socceroos the other day, actually. And he's pretty young. I reckon he's maybe 23, bit younger. So good on set pieces, can play all across the attacking midfield positions, left, right, central. And another one, I don't know if you're in need of a goalkeeper at all, but Matt Ryan. Have you heard of Matt Ryan?
Yeah. Brighton and Arsenal.
Brighton and Arsenal, exactly. I believe his contract's up with Brighton at the moment. So if Arsenal don't extend the loan, that could be an interesting one, because he's a goalkeeper who likes to play out from back. Obviously played under Ange at the 2014 World Cup. Ange knows him well. He knows Ange well. Uses his feet, great with using his feet. And he's almost Ange's perfect keeper, I reckon. So if you're in the market for a keeper, he's one that could definitely be on the radar. And he's a good leader as well. He's captained the Socceroos a couple of times. You've got a bit of a leadership gap with Scott Brown leaving, I believe. So that might fill a bit of a hole for you guys. And maybe the last one I can think of, I'm not an expert on Japanese football, really, so there might be a few there, but I couldn't really name specifics. But Jackson Irvine could be an interesting one. He's played in Scotland. He's at Hibs at the moment, I believe. You would know of him, I'd say. He's a kind of...
Do you know he was in Celtic's development team? That's why I would know him.
Exactly. Yeah. He's a bit of a combative midfielder. I think he's 6'3", something, 6'2", tall guy, like 190 centimeters ish. He's a bit of a kind of all action midfielder. He can score goals. He's kind of good in the air, good aerially, hard in the challenge. So he could be one on the short list as well, on the shopping list for Ange.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about the strengths of Ange's game, but would you say there's any weaknesses to Ange's management style or the way that he puts out his team that may be problematic to his new club?
Yeah, I've been full of praise for Ange so far. There are a couple of things that could see him really have the pressure go even higher when he starts. Like I said before, I touched on the stubbornness. That could maybe cost him if there's a superstar player maybe who doesn't agree with his ways. That could spark a bit of a dressing room revolt, something like that. Maybe, hopefully not. But he's really set in his ways, and that could possibly come back to bite him. And another thing, it's a bit of a different case with Celtic, I reckon, because it's a two-team league, obviously. So it's finishing first or finishing second. It's going to be one or the other, unless it's the most disastrous of seasons. Sometimes it takes a while to really drum in his ways because his ways are so extreme. If the players aren't fit enough or they're not used to playing this style of game, it can take a while to bed in his philosophy. I know when he coached Yokohama F. Marinos, the team he was at before, they were fifth the season before he came, and they were 12th in his first season. They won the league after, but it took a while for him to, kind of instill his philosophy into the team. And another thing I've just thought of that happened with Yokohama a couple of times, maybe some other teams as well, the keepers play really high up the field. They could be sitting at halfway, nearly halfway in corners, or when the attack's really high up the field, high up the pitch. So I think it happened twice in a game once at Yokohama. The keepers got lobbed from inside from the other half. So that could be a thing that would potentially happen. But Celtic, they're hopefully, for his sake and for your sake, for everyone's sake, really, they're already a team that dominates games. They set out to dominate games almost all the time. So hopefully they'll be ready for what's ahead.
That sounds really exciting. I'm not going to lie. It sounds like really, really attacking based. It's exactly what we need, because a lot of teams, they sit behind the ball, or they allow us to have 60, 70% of the possession and just sit there, and they're so hard to break down. So it's good that somebody's pushing us up, so that somebody's going to be pushing us up so high. That's really exciting to hear.
Just quickly, when he coached Brisbane Roar, he took them on a 36-game unbeaten streak, which is a record in Australian sport, and he had them playing in a way that people called them Raw Salona, because they played like Barcelona. Really, it's not fully a joke, because if you look up YouTube clips of that team, it's phenomenal the way they played. It is really, really amazing, and yeah, you'll be enjoying it. And it will be certainly Celtic games will be ones that neutrals will love to watch. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really good to hear. I'm actually quite excited. So, a person that you and I will know quite well, do you think that Ange can revitalise the career of fellow Aussie Tom Rogic after a season mostly spent on the sidelines? Obviously, he was a big international player for you guys.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Tom Rogic has obviously had his struggles with injuries all throughout his career, really. He's missed the most recent Socceroos camp, or the Socceroos camp that's happening at the moment, because he's out injured, I believe, not fully fit. And also the first big tournament that Ange coached for the Socceroos was the 2014 World Cup, and Rogic was a late out of that because of injury. So he's obviously had a bit of an injury-plagued career, but when he's at his best, he's a thrilling player to watch. It's amazing. And yeah, I can't say anything for certain, but Tom Rogic knows Ange knows Tom. Rogic will be looking to impress Ange from the get-go. There's no doubt about that in my mind at all. And he's signed till Rogic is signed till 2023, I believe. So he's still got a couple of seasons. Hopefully he can get the best out of him. The question is, it's not really in Ange's hands, but if he can stay on the park, I reckon he will be able to get the best out of him. Fingers crossed, at least.
Yeah, he's been on the sidelines quite a lot this season. Do you think he's done the right thing to sort of bide his time and wait for the new manager to come in? Obviously, he's got someone that he knows so well, because maybe in the past he didn't really get on with Neil Lennon. There's been a couple of murmurings that the two weren't the biggest fans of each other. So do you think it's been worth it that he's bided his time and now he's got a manager that knows exactly how to work with him?
Yeah, look, if like I said, if he can get on the park, he will be having no regrets, I don't think, about biding his time, really, because he'll be smashing it again. I would say that he's never been like Tom Rogic has never been a super hard runner kind of. His work rate isn't the highest. And when he played under Ange for the Socceroos, he did amazing things technically, but at times some people thought that he could be a bit of a liability off the ball in terms of his defensive work rate. But obviously Ange and Tom being basically with each other 24/7, 7 days a week at club level, which they weren't at international level, obviously they have much more time to focus on all the aspects of his play, like you will with every player, really. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if he's able to get on the park and what Ange gets out of him.
Seems really good. Finally, do you honestly think, as if that sounds like there's doubts about that? Do you think that Ange can deliver success to Celtic Football Club that we're so desperate for?
Yeah, look, I want it just as much as you. All Australians, like Celtic are going to have 25 million more fans when Ange is at the club, because all the Australians are going to be getting behind him, other than the Rangers fans, of course. And so Celtic, they're a big club, so there's lots of excitement. They're probably one of the maybe top 10 supported clubs in Australia, and there's a lot of pressure, more pressure than he's ever had to face, and pressures and doubts which he's had from all these Celtic fans. It's what he thrives off, really. He's had it at every club he's been at, really. Where when before he coached Brisbane Roar, he couldn't find a job because he was basically cast away as a kind of member of the old style of football, because he played in a bit of a different era. Like before the A-League era, we had another league, and he played in that league. He managed in that league, so he was seen as a bit of maybe even a dinosaur, because he just played in that old style of the old league. But when he came in, he revolutionised it. And I reckon if he gets time, he could well win the title in his first season. I'd say probably more likely than not he'll win the title in his first season. And then if he's there long enough, he'll be looking to win in Europe. He'll be looking to win trophies in Europe. Europa League, maybe even Champions League. It's been 54 years for you guys since you won the Champions League, I think. But there's no doubt in my mind that Ange will be thinking of ways, he will have already thought of ways how to win the Champions League with this club. He's an ambitious guy, and he left the Socceroos because the kind of the higher-ups at the Socceroos didn't have the same ambition as him. He's so ambitious, and it's just a question of whether he gets the right start and gets the best out of his players from the off. If he can, Celtic will be a force, not just in Scotland like they have been forever, but maybe even in Europe, which is something that I'm sure you're really excited about and I'm really excited about. It's just a matter of if he gets the good start.
Perfect, mate. So my last thing I'm going to say, do you have any final sort of comments regarding Ange that you want to share with the rest of the Celtic support?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting one. The board at Celtic and the people that hired him and the people that scouted him out, really. They're not going to be going to this thing knowing nothing like lots of Celtic fans are. They know that sometimes he takes a while to get things right. So maybe I was thinking about this point. It could spark a bit of rage, but let's just say that unless it's a disaster, Celtic will be in the title race come close to the end of this coming season. If it gets to the end of the season and you've lost the title by 3 points or whatever, I think the board will be thinking that, I could well be wrong with this, but the board might think that there's no point sacking him because we know this guy is going to bring this magic and the goods. He's going to bring this amazing football next season if he hasn't already in the first season. So, like, if you've already lost the title, what's the point of sacking him? Because you're almost certainly, I'd say, as a bit of an optimist, you're almost certainly going to win in the second season if he is there for the second season, which I hope he is.
If we were to lose the title by 3 points, we would be 22 points better off than we were this season. So, do you know, that sounds like improvement to me. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question for you? Can I just ask a quick question of you?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you did lose the title by 3 points, would you be calling for Ange's head? Would you be calling for him to be sacked?
I wouldn't, to be honest, but that would be because that I would see an improvement in the way the team was playing in terms of a playing style. If we had a sort of identity that we were sticking to, if I seen that we were doing that and that the overall play had improved and that we were working better both on and off the ball, then I would say that progress was being made. I would say we've got to trust the process. I know Philadelphia say that a lot, but you've got to trust the process. Things don't come overnight, and if it takes 2 seasons, it takes 2 seasons. At the end of the day, I would say that Celtic are in a rebuild, and these things take time. So, I mean, I'm excited for what's coming next, but these things take time, and we've just got to be patient with it. But I'm optimistic, especially after hearing talk about Celtic, the way he talks about it as a project and his ambitions for the club. I'm a lot more excited than I was last week after hearing from fellow Australian journalists like yourself. There's a lot of positivity going about Ange, and I wish, that's one thing I would say. I wish more Scottish media were more positive about our coaches, the way Australians are about their coaches. I think we could learn a lot about the way that you guys are talking about Ange. It's exciting, definitely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen with regards to POSTECOGLOU.
Yeah, the point you made about how we view Australian coaches, it is not like that at all with all Australian coaches, but this guy is almost seen as a messiah for Australian football. I don't know if there is a Scottish equivalent, maybe.
Probably 50 years ago.
Yeah, you
and
could
Alex
even. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, he's almost an Alex Ferguson or an Arsene Wenger of Australian football. But he is just viewed so many steps higher than all other managers Australian football, and almost, you could say, Australian sport has ever had.
That sounds phenomenal. Thank you very much, mate.
Well, that was Ryan speaking with Harper there. You can go and check out a lot of Harper's stuff. I'll drop all his social media things in the description below if you want to go and follow him, pose any questions to him on Twitter about Ange Postecoglou. He's also got an interview on, I think it is, wait, I just make sure I've got it right here. There's an interview on Kick 360 Australia and the Where Do We Begin podcast with Scott McDonald, of course, former Celtic player, so you might want to check that out as well. Ryan, you were the one who obviously got to sit down and talk to Harper. How was it to speak with someone who knows a bit more about him, and did it encourage you a bit more?
I think that's where a lot of my sort of optimism that I've brought onto this podcast today has come from. Hearing it from the horse's mouth.
That's not very nice calling Harper a horse.
No, I was gonna be stereotypical, but you don't want to be offensive with that sort of thing. You don't want to say kangaroo's mouth or something.
Oh,
that sounds absolutely terrible.
I know, you don't want to say that.
No, to be fair to Harper, he said he doesn't get offended by stereotypes at all. Like, that wasn't even like an offensive comment or that or whatnot. But no,
he seems like a lovely guy. The interview is brilliant. Really good.
The optimism. I feel like all the things that he's talking about are all the things that we need. I mean, he does make a comment in the interview. Obviously, you've heard it. On us potentially winning the Europa League or Champions League. I'm like, oh, hold on a wee minute. But I mean, I admire the optimism, and he sounds like he's a very driven guy, and he seems like he's got the whole of Australia supporting him, which is absolutely brilliant.
More influx for the club then when they're all running about with POSTECOGLOU on the back of their shirts. That's what
dingo dollars to go with them belly dollars.
Aye, that's right. Yeah, fuck's sake, nice one, Ryan. Get that in a t-shirt. Sell that. But aye, thanks very much to Harper for coming on today's show. An absolute pleasure. And Ryan, thanks for doing that for us, because I couldn't make it. I had other things on, so I'm very happy you managed to do that for us. Right, let's move on to the final post of the show then, just to wrap us up. It's the Twitter questions, of course. We like to pride ourselves in this podcast. We get in the viewers and the listeners involved as much as possible. So we'll start off with Mark, who was on the most recent episode of the phone, and Mark was getting great reviews, man, when he was on. People loved him. Looking forward to having the chance to speak to him again. He's posed the question: can the board really expect the fans to be all in and back the manager if they don't give him the backing? He needs money, he needs his own team, and he needs his own autonomy over everything a manager should have. Kieran, you've already kind of alluded to that. That's the key thing now, isn't it? Backing the manager.
I know, it's now that he's in the door, there's no point moaning about it. And the board, as I say, they've put us in this situation. They need to back him. They've made the call, give him the money. That's all I've got to say on that matter.
Ryan, what about you? It was Kieran that kind of took us away with that earlier. He said everything he's had to say, but the board have if to some extent an even bigger responsibility than him now of directing us through this rebuild season.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dominic Mackay's mentioned the modernisation of the club. I'll wait and see that before I make any judgments on what that modernisation will be. But I would say it has to be a 75-25 sort of split in terms of autonomy, because I feel like the director of football should still have a higher power, and I hope that we're still in for one. Yeah,
we're waiting patiently for that. It's taking the manager was bad enough, but now this is going to take over, man. Connor Carr, who has also been on the phone in before, he's asked, can we change Hoopy the Hound into a kangaroo and call him Hoppy the Hopper? How's that sound? Does that tickle your fancies?
Do you know, I'd get rid of Hoopy's sister and get a kangaroo. There doesn't need to be two Hoopies.
What is her name again?
She's got a terrible name that's something to do with. Oh my god!
That's pissed me off.
It's bad enough.
It's Haley.
Is it Haley?
Haley the Hound.
Haley for Hale.
Aye, that's the one. Brilliant, fantastic. What a marketing team. We've got. Do you think, Reese says, do you think the term of football manager shows we won't get a director of football? A very good question. Something we didn't even touch on that I meant to bring up from the statement. They said Celtic are glad to announce their new football manager. They didn't say head coach. Ryan, did that give you a little bit of the fear?
It does to an extent, but they used the term football manager instead of manager, which makes me think that there's maybe more in that. I know a lot of other podcasts are talking about this same point as well, but it's more a wait and see thing than anything else. We'll wait and see about this modernisation, as I've talked about before making any judgments as to what these terms mean. I just hope that we get more clarification in the coming weeks as to what sort of structure we're going to put in place, because they did promise us this last season, the end of last season, the modernisation of the club, and I'll wait with patience to see if they follow through on their promise.
Do you have that patience, Kieran? Is it patience or anxiousness at this point?
It's very much anxiousness, because I don't know, it's very mixed signals with what they're saying. So hopefully they can actually go forward and do what Dom Mackay's saying about modernising the club.
And I'll end off with one final question. We have had a few in today. Thanks to everybody who's sent in their questions. As always, we're aiming to do probably a phone in the next week or so. Before I head off to London, with me and Kieran jet off to London for the Scotland-England game. So we'll keep an eye out on the Twitter. Make sure to follow at Sellik Podcast, SELLIK, and you can get involved with all the phone-ins in the future. The last live one went down brilliant, the first live one as well. So thanks for that. But the final question comes from the appropriately named Ange Postecoglou. Postecoglou Facts account. He says, hey guys, Ange likes youths working hard with pace, passing and intelligence. And I'm going to alter the question a little bit here. He says which Celtic youth might fit that mould. I'm just going to, I'm going to ask the question here. If there's one youth player at the club right now that you think could suit what we're hearing from Ange Postecoglou, or that you want to see in Ange Postecoglou's side next season, who would it be? Out of all the players we've got, it could be ones out on loan, it could be ones at the club, it could be anybody at all. I'll start. I know it doesn't really fit the mold of the attacking brand of football we're talking here, but I am dying to see Leo Hjelde get a chance in the Celtic team next season. Dying for it. What are you laughing at? I want to see Leo Hjelde.
I'm laughing because it's the exact same.
Oh, it's the exact same.
That is the one guy that I want to see in the team, because all I've heard is rave reviews about him. He's 18 years old. He looks ready. He looks physically mature. He's a big lad, so I think he can come in and make his name in the Celtic first team like Aya did after he came back from loan.
Scored for the not away under 21s or under 18s the other night as well.
Under 18s against Portugal.
So, always good to see that. Kieran, is there anybody in the top of your head you'd like to see in the team next year?
I'd also like to see Hjelde get a chance, but I'm just going to go with the obvious one. I want to see Karamoko Dembele. I spoke about it earlier. He's somebody that's been so highly rated, and hopefully this manager that can finally get him into a system that he can start playing, because that's an attacking brand of football. He likes getting the best out of players. Hopefully he's the man to try and get Dembele's career kick started at Celtic.
Well, that's it then. A brilliant first episode for the Ange Postecoglou era. We can shut that chapter behind us for the first 26 episodes of the show. This is it now. We're going to try and be positive, and hopefully in the next 26 episodes, it is a completely different tone that we are talking with. Ryan, you look.
Have we done 26 episodes
already? This is episode 27. This is 27, mate.
That's absolutely mental. That time flies, doesn't it? Time flies when you're drowning in misery.
We're not having fun anyway. Don't say that.
No, I wasn't. Don't worry, mate. I wasn't.
Welcome to Celtic Football Club, Mr. Postecoglou. We hopefully will speak to you soon. Kieran, Ryan, thank you very much for joining me on this fine Friday afternoon. If you have been watching on YouTube, make sure to hit like and subscribe. If you've been listening on all the podcast channels such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to follow and share out the show. And we'll see you all next time.